All right. Well, I'll welcome everybody. Welcome, especially to our friends in the Eastern time zone. Good afternoon to you, and good morning to our friends in the Central and Mountain time zones, like myself. And good day to everybody else who's going to tune into this rebroadcast at some time later. We're excited to bring you a true power hour teaching on habits that we've prepared, and we're just pumped. I think it's going to be a tremendous hour. We're kicking off this time together with a focus on exploring how our habits impact our lives, either for good or for bad, and how we can leverage the power of habit for positive change in life. So let me know if you guys can all see my screen and everything. Just give me a thumbs up maybe in the chat. I want to make sure everybody is watching what we're watching. So I was awesome. I was talking to a gentleman not too long ago, and he was telling me about how this past year especially was really bad for creating bad habits due to the whole global pandemic. And maybe you can relate. And so I did some digging and some research on some of the worst habits that we've created during the whole global health crisis. And this is what we came up with. Top bad habits created during the quarantine. Panic eating of comfort foods. I was totally guilty of this one. We desired that feel good feeling. So we ate and we ate and we ate and ice cream and all that happened. So the first bad habit created during the pandemic. How about this? Social media binges. Is anybody else constantly scrolling through Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat, figuring out what's going on in the world and how many the numbers, watch them go up and down in the news? Oh my gosh, that was a horrible bad habit. How about this one? A total lack of structure. We departed from our normal way of life. Our work, sleep, home life routine just came into this mishmash of everybody working and living and schooling and recreating at home. And you've seen the memes like I have of people who only get dressed from like the waist up. Like I can tell you some bad habits were created due to that as well. And finally, not exercising. That was a bad habit that was created due to so many gyms and health and fitness centers being closed down. And if we didn't have that discipline before, how many people picked it up? I mean, that's a difficult habit to start. So maybe one or maybe all of those bad habits set in for you, or maybe you have another bad habit that you're looking to break. Maybe you're told to watch this webinar by someone who thinks you have a bad habit even. I don't know what your story is, but what I can tell you is that we're going to have a blast in this hour doing a deep dive into understanding what a habit is, how a habit is formed, and how you can begin to replace those bad habits with some good ones. We're even going to give you 9 practical strategies that you can begin employing today to begin building better habits. So we've got a ton of material to cover today. And so without further ado, I want to introduce you to a man that needs no introduction, founder and leader of Bill Cox Coaching. Bill, that was like your drum roll. So Bill Cox, take it away, my friend.
Dude, thank you. I just want to let you know I'm fully dressed, not just have a sweater on today. So I am a big believer in I still dress as if I were going to go out and do business, at a corporation or at a business. I have to do that. I just can't function mentally right if I don't. I can't speak for Paul though, so I don't know. But today we're going to be talking about building better habits, and we've got a great group. So there's 8 total, which means we can have a really great interactive mastermind. We had about 15 register, so we're about halfway there, which is kind of what we're experiencing with our webinar, which is great. So super excited to have all you, and really want to just start out with a couple questions here and be happy to have you kind of put these in the chat as we start here. So first of all, talk to me about what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word habits? You can either put that in the chat. Guilty of all. That's funny. What's the first thing you think of when you hear that word habits? Repetition? Okay, negative. Organized, good. All right, love it. Anybody else? Bad habits, hard to break, like that Chicago 17 song, right? Need better habits. Yeah. Well, I think you're not alone. Automation, that's a good one. We're going to actually talk about that here in a little bit. So appreciate that. Something always doing without thinking about it. Thank you, Laura. You just actually defined what a habit is. We're going to talk about that in just 1 second. So help me understand, like, what do you want to gain? What do you want most to gain from today's session? Let me know. The hour that we have together, not even that now, we got about 53 minutes left. Fighting procrastination. That's awesome. Tracy, you should have joined us in our 4-week course on eliminating procrastination. We're halfway through. They definitely relate. Great, I love that. Insight and encouragement to make change. Great, Lori. I love that. It's amazing how much we need inspiration and motivation. It is a big part of the change process, and hope we can deliver on that today. Motivation, I'm with you, buddy. Work on better habits, eliminating bad ones and building good ones. Great, thanks, Roscoe. Appreciate all that. Let's keep going. So now that I have kind of an idea of what we want to gain today, I don't know if you guys heard the story about the old man and the boy. It was a grandfather and his grandson, and he noticed he was picking up some bad habits, and he wanted to kind of teach his grandson a lesson. So he said, hey, let's go for a walk. And as they began to kind of walk through the woods, he looked down and he noticed this little plant. And he said, to see if you can pull it up by the root. And he reached down just like nothing. He said, I yanked it right out, Grandpa, nothing to it. And they continued to walk along and through the woods, and he found a plant that was somewhat bigger. And he said, hey, see if you can pull that one out. And again, he, without too much effort, took a little bit more strength, but he pulled it out and he kind of flexed his muscles like, got that one too, Grandpa. As they continued to walk through the woods, he found a smaller tree. And he said, hey, see if you can pull that out. You're strong, you got lots of muscle. And he leaned into it. He worked at it back and forth, twisted it and pushed it back and forth. And after about 5 minutes, he finally was able to pull it up by the roots, and he was just about exhausted. He's like, wow. He said, good job. And they kept walking through the woods until they came to this large oak tree. And he says, okay, now I want you to yank that one out by the roots. He's like, Grandpa, there's no way I can do that. He said, that's right. He said, that's kind of the way it is with habits. He said, when we first start forming them, they're easy to change and easy to develop new ones. But the longer that we let certain habits exist in our life, they become just like that little tree that grows into a big tree, and they become harder and harder and harder to uproot. That is such a powerful story when you think about this whole concept of eliminating bad habits and building new habits. And James Allen, in his classic book, As a Man Thinketh, says this: the law of the harvest is to reap more than you sow. Sow an act and you reap a habit. Sow a habit and you reap a character. Sow a character and you reap a destiny. I think that's super powerful. I think all of us can relate to that. I don't think there's anything I'm telling you right now, when you think about this concept of habits, that's surprising about that. And we're going to talk a lot today about how you can build better habits. And we're going to give you some great strategies that, if applied, can really help you change your life and start some healthy habits in areas that you want to see them happen, and even stop doing some things that you're currently doing that aren't serving you and taking you in the direction that you want to go. A lot of the stuff that I'm drawn on today, I want to encourage you to get this book in your library. It comes from James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, one of the best books I've read on habit formation. And James has some phenomenal stuff in that book that I'm going to be highlighting during the course of today's webinar. But let's just ask the question, what are habits? I mean, like, what are they? Simply defined, a habit is an acquired mode of behavior that has become nearly or completely involuntary, a behavior pattern acquired by frequent repetition. Let's think of it this way. Put another way, it's an action repeated so frequently that it's done unconsciously. Really, our habits are, much of our lives are made up of rhythms and routines. In fact, psychologists from the University of Southern California believe that 45% of our lives, are derived from daily rhythms, things that we call these habits or routines. An additional study suggests this, done by neurobiologists and cognitive psychologists, indicate that 40 to 95% of human behavior, how we think, what we say, our overall actions fall into this category that we know of as habits. It's crazy. So if you think about it, like 50% of our lives are kind of being lived on autopilot. I don't know if you've ever asked yourself the question, why is it? Why do you think we're designed this way? Just go ahead and throw that in the chat. Why is it that as people, we would be created to live much of our lives kind of like on autopilot? Why do you think that is? Make life easier? Yeah, definitely. Anybody else? Survival. What do you mean? Talk to me about that, Tracy.
Kind of like survival of the fittest, where if you do something and it works and you make it through, you keep doing it because you're good.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the truth is our brains are created for this. Your brain is an amazing problem solver. If you think about that, your brain is designed to make life easier for you. Think about it. Another way of defining habits are simply, they are mental shortcuts learned from experience. How many of you guys, when you brush your teeth every night or in the morning, like have to literally cognitively think about every aspect of how you go about brushing your teeth? We don't even think about it. Same way with driving our cars. Man, the first time that I learned how to drive when I was 16, it was the most, you guys can probably relate to this, it was like the most stressful evening of my life. First of all, it was the first time I was driving out in traffic and my dad was in the passenger seat. And if you know my dad, you know that I would be like super paranoid about the fact that he was in the driver's seat watching. And as I'm driving, I'm just trying to think about every aspect of what I needed to do, from making the gas, pushing on the gas, to knowing when to push on the brake and not forgetting my turn signal, and looking, I was on a 4-lane highway. So it's like looking at the traffic to my left and behind me and in front of me. And I'm trying to pay attention to all these things, make sure I'm going, the speed limit, looking in my rearview mirror. And we get off to the 4-lane, off the exit that went into Meadville. And I was so focused on trying to put everything together that I blew right through a red light. Now, thankfully, there was nobody coming the other direction. But my neocortex, my frontal cortex was trying to process everything, and it just didn't have the horsepower to do it. But as well as I know, like, the more you drive, reminds me of a trip I was taking a few years ago, my family on the way to Michigan to see friends. Here I was on I-75 coming out of Detroit, and it was around rush hour, and there's like 4 lanes and everybody's going like 75 miles an hour. And the free lane is like, or the interstate is just like packed with traffic. And I found that I drove for like 2 hours, and I looked down, I was like, holy cow. I've been driving for like 2 hours and I don't even remember the last 2 hours of what I've been doing. Why? Because Our brains are designed to figure things out. They're designed to solve problems and make life easier for us. If you think about how your brain is actually designed, think about your prefrontal cortex, your thinking part of your brain. That's able to handle like teaspoons full of information, whereas your subconscious mind is designed to handle tidal waves of information. And so what happens is, while our subconscious mind does not have the power of autonomy and creation and conscious thought, it's a great learner. And once it figures things out, it kind of takes over, and it frees up our conscious mind to deal with more pressing problems. It allows space for creative thinking and problem solving and dealing with things in the moment that we need to deal with. It's really kind of amazing. So if you think about it, just kind of go through a mental checklist and just think about all the different habits, all these different subconscious routines that your brain has figured out and fully automated just to make life easier for you. In some ways, now, as you go down through this list, see whether or not these solutions that you've created are serving you well or not so well. So hitting the snooze button, right? Making coffee when you get up, morning prayer and meditation, brushing your teeth, checking email, checking Facebook. You know, Paul talked about that. Taking daily walks, listening to the radio on the way to work, watching the 6:30 evening news, watching TV, biting our fingernails, throwing our clothes on the floor instead of in the hamper, snacking after 8 p.m., which is one of the biggest ones I'm working on right now, and sweeping or vacuuming the floors. All these kinds of behaviors, these routines that our lives are completely comprised of. Now, when you think about habits, I want you to take one step back and just kind of ask yourself, what problem is your brain trying to solve? What is the deeper motivation that you're trying to meet, the need you're trying to meet behind the habit? Because there's always something behind it. So as you look at this list, think about some of your habits and what they're related to. Does it have to do with reducing uncertainty? Maybe it's meeting physical needs such as food and water. You know, how many of us look, into our Facebook feed and constantly are addicted to getting that thumbs up sign, that somebody liked what I shared. Do people care? I want to know that I matter. And we all care about those things, right? Achieving status or prestige. Maybe it's self-mastery or connecting or bonding with others. When you think about habits, there's always a deeper need that we're trying to meet. And when that need is met, and this is the really powerful thing about habits we need to understand, there's a chemical that's released in our brain. And that chemical is called dopamine. 3 things about dopamine that are really important to understand. Number one, it's one of those chemicals that make us feel happy. It's released both when you crave something and when you experience the reward of having it. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. And it's highly addictive. So when we talk about why is it that I can't break this habit? I just don't have enough willpower. We ask ourselves those things. Well, it's because we are highly addicted to receiving certain rewards, meeting certain needs. And that once we have those rhythms, these loops, those neural pathways ingrained in our brains, they become a very powerful influence to happen repeatedly, almost unconsciously. I love what James Clear says. In his book, he says, every action is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. No single instance will transform your beliefs, but as the votes build up, so does the evidence of your new identity. This is one reason why meaningful change does not require radical change. And this is really important. And this is what James talks about, when he talks about the concept of stored up work. And I want you to think about this now from the positive side, because a number of us, we have some new routines, new rhythms, new habits that we want to develop and cultivate. Maybe it's kind of getting in shape. Maybe it's losing, some weight. Maybe it's replacing a habit like watching TV with a reading or something like that to accomplish something in your life. Or maybe it's related to building wealth or, investing for the future. And sometimes we start down these paths of change. And what happens? Well, when we start, and initially we don't notice any change, and we work at it for a week or 2 weeks, and we still don't see any noticeable difference from the work that we're doing, from the things that we're doing. And what often happens? Well, what often happens is we get frustrated and we quit because we think none of it is making any difference. What we don't realize is all of those steps, those incremental steps that we're taking, are stored up. They're not lost. Think about how ice melts. When it's 27 degrees, do you notice any difference between that and 28 degrees or 29 degrees or 30 degrees or 31 degrees? We don't see any visible change to the ice, but all of the stored up work is still at work inside of that ice cube, so that when it hits 32 degrees, what happens? The ice starts to melt. So think about the power of that. Think about the power of incremental change when you think about incorporating these new routines in your life. As Claire says, we change bit by bit, day by day, habit by habit. We are continually undergoing micro evolutions of the self. That to me is such a powerful quote. We're either moving forward into growth or we're atrophying, away from that life we want to become. And every single action we take is a micro evolution, drawing us toward the person that we want to become, or moving us away from the person that we want to become. So ask yourself the question, who are you becoming through your habits? And this is really important, because a lot of times when we think about the development of habits, what do we think about? We think about the habit that we want to incorporate, and then the steps or the process that we're going to need in order to incorporate and make that habit a reality. But what we miss is the core of the issue, and that is our identity. So the question is, the most foundational question is, as you think about your habits, the larger, bigger, deeper question is, who do you want to become? What kind of person do you want to become, right? And then once you define that, then you can connect your habits, the outcomes that you want, ultimately to the identity of the person that you want to become. So let's talk about re-engineering some habits. Okay, how do we go about the process of re-engineering? Taking these routines or rhythms, and we all have them, these habits that we don't want to be there, but that are so hard to break, and stop doing those, and then even replace those with something that's healthier, right? Well, let's talk about that. And in order to do that, it's first important to kind of break down and look at the various components of a habit. What makes a habit a habit? Well, first of all, they start with these things called triggers or cues, right? So this is any stimulus. It always starts at the brainstem, right? Through our 5 senses, any stimulus that reshapes our thoughts and actions. Something that we see, something that we hear, something in the environment around us that triggers something. Okay, and then that trigger leads to this next thing, which is A trigger leads to a craving, okay? Oh, wait a second. Let me back up here. So when you think about figuring your triggers, I apologize. Ask yourself some questions. Are you more likely to drink too much when you're with certain people? Okay. Is there a particular time of the day when you just have to have something sweet? Mine is always about 6 o'clock, right after dinner. That is the toughest time when I want something sweet. What emotions tend to provoke your worst habits? Maybe it's stress, fatigue, anger, nervousness, or boredom. When do you experience those emotions? Who are you with? Where are you? Or what are you doing? And finally, what situations prompt your bad habits to start? Okay, what might it be? Could it be getting in your car, right? Maybe it's, opening your computer or feeling physically insecure. Maybe it's dealing with deadlines, something in the environment around you that acts as a trigger. And then that trigger does what? The trigger creates a craving, this powerful desire for something. And kind of going back a couple slides, this is where that dopamine kicks in, right? You have this powerful craving that begins. And that craving does what? The craving leads to what? It leads to a behavior, a particular way of acting that finally takes us where? It takes us to the last part of the habit loop, which is that reward, something given in return for my behavior. So you can kind of see in the illustration on this page, I don't know how many of you are big, any big coffee drinkers on the line today? I'm a huge coffee drinker. So man, I'll tell you, when I get up in the morning, oh man, the grinding of, when I hear the grinder and the smell of coffee beans, or even the sight of my coffee maker, it automatically creates that craving for the smell and that first sip of a freshly brewed cup of 8 o'clock bean Colombian Peaks coffee. Oh my gosh. Which leads to what? Me putting those beans in my hopper, brewing the coffee, listening to the gurgling of the coffee maker, and then finally, when I pour that first cup and take a sip, that is like the most amazing thing. That is my happy place in the morning. I don't know what I would do without that habit loop in the morning to get my day started. So let's look at some keys to building healthy habits with the time that we have left. And the cool thing is, if you have a habit that you want to undo, it's important to understand that your habits are made, therefore they can be unmade, right? But when you think about, and let me see this in the chat now, when you think about like a positive habit that you want to start, what would one be? Talk to me about that. Put that in the chat. What's one new positive habit that you would love to start? Getting more sleep. Okay. Who else? Sleep is a big one. That is a huge habit. Exercise. Yeah. So exercise. Better focus when nervous. Stop talking too much. Okay. Planning. Waking up without the snooze. I hear you, John. Gotcha. And reading. Well, great. These are awesome. Okay, so some of the keystone habits that we talk about in my course on habits, you can think about some of these, and we've mentioned some of these. These we call keystone habits because they're the kind of habits that create momentum in your life and then allow for the formation of other habits to come more easily. I'll mention sleep, personal and spiritual development, exercise, just the habit of gratitude Recently, I've started a 5-minute journal with one of the reasons is to help cultivate in me a deeper level of gratitude, adding value to others. And then, as one of you mentioned in the chat, being more intentional with planning. Okay, so first step is identify that habit that you want to create. We've done that. So secondly, you want to create a compelling picture of the future. Now, why is this so important? Well, it's really important because our brain thinks in pictures. I mean, think about that. Your brain thinks in pictures. So you want to begin to ask yourself who you want to become. Hey, Johnny, can you put yourself on mute, buddy? Who do you want to become? So when you think about that area of your life, do you want to see change in, whether it's getting healthier or being more peaceful? Any area that you want to choose, you want to go and think about that area of your life and develop as clear and as compelling of a mental picture of what you're going to look like in that area when that change has taken place. I don't know if any of you are Beachbody fans, but I love Beachbody workouts because they just kind of give me a plan and a pathway of where I want to get to in my health. But one of the cool things about Beachbody, and you probably see this all the time in workout programs, is what do they always do? They ask you to take a before picture, and then they ask you to send in the after picture. And when they're selling Beachbody, what do they always show? They always show these before and afters. Why? Because they're showing you what you can look like if you commit to their programs, right? So you want to think about that. Polly, there we go. Very cool. So here's an example from one of my classes. One of the participants, she was focused on developing a better relationship with her daughters and really strengthening that home family environment so that she could develop some routines and rhythms to their daily interactions that would really build a much stronger relationship with her daughters. So her purpose statement was, I want to be a positive role model for my girls so they know that a woman can be successful in all aspects of life, career, family, personal, without sacrificing any of her dreams. I want to empower their independence, instill a respectful attitude toward all living things, and encourage them to make a difference in their own lives and in the lives of others around them. So then our next step in the process, actually some of you on the call have gone through this process, was to create an envisioned future. And she wrote this: to continue to be a safe place for them, to ensure they know that there is no judgment here, just love and encouragement. Continue to be as close as we are all now, and continue to be home for each other as they grow and create their own lives. Make sure they know that our door's always open no matter what. So she sent that to me and she asked for some feedback. And what I said was, hey, I would love to see add a little more detail to your envisioned future. Describe what your relationship is like with your daughters when it's working exactly as you would envision. Include some examples of what is happening. Describe what their lives might be like as successful, empowered women and how they might be making a difference in the world. So I was asking her to hey, play the movie for me. Describe this as if you're describing a scene from the movie. And here's what she wrote. She wrote, in my envisioned future, my relationship with my kids continues to grow in trust, love, and respect. To me, this means our relationship would be open, honest, and candid, even raw. Through all the highs and lows, life is bound to throw our way. Through all the different phases of life, from scraped knees to broken hearts, I see us crying together, laughing together, and regularly leaning on each other. Mason will inevitably command any room she walks into with her larger-than-life personality. She will take on some sort of altruistic work, as she's always putting others before herself. ensuring everyone is happy and gets a hug whenever needed. May will show the world that being kind is cool, that it is always okay to dance to the beat of your own drum, that optimism is contagious. Logan will feel most comfortable assessing any situation from a safe distance, taking in all the things happening around her. See the difference? The different pictures she's painting between her two daughters. Although normally quiet, she will have no problem voicing her opinion when she sees fit. She will take on a career in journalism or investigation, where she can be the first one to break a story or uncover information. Lo will be a prime example to the world. A prime example to the world. The girls can have voices too. The laughing is the best medicine, and that being courageous is the best way to get where you want to be. Notice the difference between her first iteration and that iteration. And you know what was amazing? When she read that out loud to the group that she was a part of, she could not finish it, because as she started reading through what she had written and the picture that she had painted with how she saw her daughters, what she saw her daughters growing into because of the environment at home that they grew up in, she got incredibly emotional. And that's the power of painting compelling images, going out at the end of that and saying, hey, what is the new person? What's the change that I want to see if this habit is fully implemented? How will I be different? What's it going to look like? And being super clear, super detailed. A lot of people like to use things called vision boards, where they literally create boards with pictures that show kind of what they're going to look like when they have implemented that habit. And at the beginning of the call, somebody said, I want motivation. Why? Because motivation is a huge part of change. It's not the only part of change, but it's a very important part of change. And change always starts at an emotional level, right? So this gets your emotional brain, pulled online to really feel the need for change, either from the perspective of this can't continue, or wow, this is the heaven that I'm heading toward. Motivation is critical. Secondly, or third, re-engineer your habit loop. So once you kind of have created that compelling picture of the future of how you're going to be different, then you can kind of start to re-engineer this loop, right? This loop is always in play. This loop is in play whether it's a bad habit or whether it's a positive habit. So make it work for you. It is a loop that's not going anywhere. This is just how we're wired as people. This is how your brain solves problems. So just make sure it's solving the right problems in the right way. And the way to do this is in 3 simple steps. Now think about this. We'll use an example here in a second. The 3 pieces, okay? First, say to yourself, every time I, right? This is your trigger. Every time you what? There's something that happens. And then that trigger leads to an old behavior. Instead of that old behavior, the 3rd piece, I will, the new behavior. So let's use this example, right? For those of you who want to beat the snooze, and we know we have some people on the call who want to eliminate that, who want to create something new and different rather than give it into that snooze. So every time I hear the alarm go off in the morning, instead of hitting the snooze button, that's the loop, right? That's the current loop. Just that craving for more sleep, right? Then the behavior, and then I fall back to sleep. That's my reward. Every time I hear the alarm go off in the morning, instead of hitting the snooze button, I will count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then stand on the floor and do 10 air squats. Recently, I implemented a whole new morning routine for myself because I wanted to get up earlier. My current routine, it got super stale at the beginning of the year. And I had read Hal Elrod's book, Miracle Morning, which I highly recommend. And Hal created this simple 5-step process that kind of helped me get out of bed when I wanted to get out of bed at 5 in the morning. So I was going to start my day an hour earlier than I was. And use his 5 steps was really simple, which is intention, which starts the night before, kind of writing out how you want your morning to start. And then you place, secondly, alarm, you place your alarm in the doorway, not next to your bed. So as soon as the alarm goes off, you have to get up to shut it off, especially if you have a spouse who's going to get really annoyed if you don't shut that alarm clock off. And you put it in the doorway so that you're already on your way to that next step in your routine. Because if you think about it, if you're trying to get up earlier and beat the snooze, when are you more unconscious, more unawake than when you first wake up? You're not even fully awake. So it makes it that much easier to go back into dreamland. So you got to get yourself awake. So it's once you shut the alarm off, that's in the middle of your doorway, you're going to that next step, which is going upstairs or wherever your kitchen is at, drinking a full glass of water. And then followed by brushing your teeth. So drinking water wakes your body up. Brushing your teeth wakes your body up even more. You ever notice at nighttime when you brush your teeth, I've always find myself getting tired and then I brush my teeth and like, I'm awake again. Something about brushing teeth that wakes us up again, wakes our bodies up. And then finally, he says, put your exercise clothes on. And you've done those 5 steps. What are you doing? Those 5 little mini steps, which are just 5 routines, 5 habits, mini habits stacked on top of one another to help get you out of bed. Now, this is really important. And I would encourage you, when you think about employing this strategy, you want to write it down. Write down what you're going to do. There's something really powerful about when we write our goals down. Write it down. What are you going to do? When are you going to do it? And where are you going to do it? Okay. When you do that, you bring the most powerful accountability partner online. And that is yourself. You help yourself become accountable to yourself. When you write goals down, statistically, it's shown the likelihood that we follow through on our goals when we write them down and are super clear about what we're going to do significantly increases that we actually follow through on those things. It's what James Clear talks about as implementation intention. You're very clear about what you want to do. You're giving yourself a pathway, okay? The 4th step is to start small. Okay, and this is why so many people rarely follow through on New Year's resolutions, because they try too big, too fast. Start really small. Do a little routine. So for example, with me, I'm wanting to take a few pounds off, okay? And so, but even more importantly, I want it to flow from an identity that I want to be a healthy, fully vital person, okay? So I want to start making a series of choices that are in harmony with that, right? So, but I'm not going to change it all in a day. So one thing I knew that I wanted to start was I want to stop drinking Diet Coke and replace that with a better option. So what I've done is replace Diet Coke with seltzer water and regular water with lemon. So it's one small change that I've just been incorporating over the past few weeks that I'm getting into a total routine on, okay? And then I'll add something to that in this overall pathway toward getting healthier and being at the weight that I want to be at. Knowing that, just like we talked about before, all the things that I'm doing represents stored up work. Now, right now, does the fact that I'm replacing Diet Coke with seltzer water and regular water make any noticeable difference? No, it really hasn't. But I know it's part of that overall process as I start stacking additional habits onto that, that it will create a cascade effect. And the next step is adding a healthy shake option for my breakfast, replacing what I've been currently eating with breakfast with this healthy shake option. And then after that, my next step is going to be to eliminate eating after 8 o'clock. I'm a huge snacker. Okay, so that'll be the next thing. And what I'm doing is I'm just stacking small habits on top of each other till at one point it's kind of like that ice melting. It's all going to hit that tipping point, and then the weight will just easily come off. So start small. Let me just stop for a second. I'm curious. I feel like I'm yammering on too much. Talk to me about what you're learning so far and any questions or thoughts you have up to this point. We've got a small group, so you can really kind of dive right in and talk to me about some of this so far.
Just how important repetition is, and continuing with your goal, even if you kind of don't want to. It's important to continue doing what you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's so true. It's easy to get discouraged, isn't it, Tracy?
Very.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
For me, the hardest thing is being consistent. I find that even if I lose that consistency, for a day or two or 2 or 3 times, whatever it is, I fall off the wagon so quickly. I need to get better at just doing the small steps consistently, repetitively, to get those habits formed.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Steve. And some habits take longer, right, than others to really form. Good point. It's a big one. What have you found, Steve, that's helpful in order to do that?
Putting things in front of me that I have access to or see. If you want to start taking vitamins, say, instead of having them, in the medicine cabinet or whatever, I'll put them on my desk. So when I sit down to work in the morning, they're right there in front of me as a reminder to take them.
Dude, that's awesome. We're going to talk about, it was a perfect segue. Lori?
I agree with Steve. I do that a lot too, but I have another point. But I'll write a Post-it the night before and put it on my bathroom mirror. So I see it first thing in the morning to remind me I have to do something. But the excuse that I always fall back on, and it really is legitimate a lot of the time, but I need to fight it more, is time, lack thereof. Every time I start finding myself doing something going toward the goal I want to get toward, something comes up and I fall off that wagon because there are other things I need to do. And then I legitimize it in the back of my mind. And then it just continues until I struggle to get back on.
Yeah. I can totally relate to that. Great point. Anybody else? Okay, well, I want to segue right into something that Steve said, because I thought that was like awesome. It was like the perfect segue, which brings us to this 5th point of optimizing your environment. Optimize your environment. And this is really cool. So there was a study, story from Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. A primary care physician there, she really wanted to, the goal was to improve the eating habits of the staff without motivation or willpower. She noticed that she just didn't feel like, hey, we're a place where, we promote health and our medical staff could be doing a lot better. But I want to do this in a way that doesn't require motivation or willpower, or make people feel like in any way we're trying to push them in a certain direction. So the plan was simply, and this kind of goes back to Steve's point, to alter what she called choice architecture. So it was to add water as a choice in the refrigerators located next to the cash register, and then place bottled water next to the food stations. And then as in addition that they would put fresh fruit out as well. And what happened? They didn't even say a word. The soda was even still there, okay? It's just that they made the water and the fresh fruits more prominent, more visible. Soda sales dropped by 11.4%, while water sales rose by 25.8%, simply by doing one thing, making it more visual, right? And it's such a powerful example of this aspect of vision. And so when you think about making things more obvious, what we learn is that the most powerful of all human sensory abilities is vision. Now think about this. 10 of the 11 million sensory receptors are dedicated to sight. That's unbelievable. Visual cues are huge. They have the greatest influence on our behavior. So when you think about the idea of, and this goes both ways. So if you want to stop a bad habit, what do you want to do? You want to make the visible cues that make doing that habit easier invisible, right? Like, don't put your remote in a prominent place in your living room, okay? Put it in a drawer somewhere 20 steps away. Think about how you arrange the furniture in your living room. What is it all centered around? Typically, our furniture is centered around the TV. Everything about the living room says, watch the TV. So it just makes it that much easier. Think about when you go to Walmart or to a grocery store. If you look at end caps, you realize end caps are those displays on the end of the aisles. The 45% of Coca-Cola is sold from end caps. You realize that? Why? Because end caps, they're very strategically positioned. And right at eye level, they want you to see what they want you to buy. So they make it more visible. So it makes it that much easier to do the behavior. So whether you're implementing a positive new healthy behavior, just like Steve said, vitamins, for example, or trying to get rid of a habit that's not serving you well, make those visible cues either less visible or more visible. 6, leverage the power of technology. So it might be just as simple as setting reminders on your phone throughout the day that just remind you to do something that you need to do. I had a former coaching client who wanted to create new mindsets for himself, and he wrote out those mindsets. I will never be wealthy, and I am not enough. And he replaced that with, I will have a growth mindset. Anything is possible for me, and I am enough. I'm bought with the price. I'm wonderfully made. Sam was so committed to changing his mindsets, the habits of his thinking, because he realized that it was limiting his business, that he literally set reminders on his phone so that all throughout the day, he was reinforcing his brain with the kind of thoughts that he wanted his mind to be characterized by. Over time, he's changed and replaced those toxic thoughts with more healthy and empowering thoughts simply by really leveraging technology. Our phones can be, they can take us in a bad direction, with habits that we don't want to have, but we can also use them for great good by automating some of the things in our life, creating reminders to help reinforce the behaviors that we want to start. 7, enlist a peak performance partner. This one is huge. Earlier I said, the most important accountability partner we can have really is ourselves. But it's kind of like Andy Stanley said at the same time, we cannot lead ourselves by ourselves. Willpower is not enough. How many of you figured that out? And in their book, Change Anything, they talk about the power of improving your people environment. And that can go in two directions. Number one, sometimes the people in our lives who are closest to us are the ones who enable those bad habits that we want to replace. And it's usually well-meaning. Like how many of you have a spouse who's a really phenomenal cook, and they cook all those foods that you love, but those foods that they cook, they're not the ones that are going to serve your goal of getting healthier, but they're not doing it because they want you to be unhealthy. They're doing it just as an expression of love because they know you like that. So for some of those people, we have to have this transforming conversation to kind of bring them into our change plan and say, hey, I need you on my team. Here's the change that I want to make. And I need you to kind of be my partner to help me do that. For myself, my wife is absolutely my peak performance partner when it comes to working out. She's always been more disciplined in that area. And so we created a workout area in our basement where we can do that together after work. And she's always that encouragement to me to kind of, hey, we can do this. Let's get this done before dinner. Come on, let's go. And for me, that just makes all the difference between working out and not working out. Number 8 is just embrace the suck. There's just something true about the fact that I'm always going to like to eat bad snacky foods after 8 o'clock at night. And replacing that with celery or not doing it altogether is not going to be easy, ever. But it reminds me of this quote that there is one thing that 99% of failures and successful people have in common. They all hate doing the same things. The difference is successful people do them anyway. This is really important. And this is why you have to keep that step 1 or step 2 of having that compelling vision of your future in front of you, never forgetting. This is why it's worth the pain, because I'm giving up short-term happiness for long-term joy. And I know that if I can keep this habit up for 10, 20, 30 days, it's going to click in for me and it's almost going to become effortless. I just have to hang in there and it'll become a positive, healthy habit. That loop will start to work for me in a powerful, positive, reinforcing way. And then number 9 is be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself, because we're all going to fall off the wagon. We're all going to try to start something just like Steve said, and we're going to be inconsistent. Don't judge yourself, just learn from that. Figure out what you need to do differently and get back on that horse and ride. As we close up, I'd love, if you've got a chance and can give me just a few more seconds, just a minute or two, I'm just curious, what strategy, as you think about all those 9 strategies, which ones do you feel like for you would be most valuable? Which one could you begin implementing right now that you'd be most motivated to take action on?
So for me, I think start small is probably, that's been my biggest problem. Every time I don't stick with something is I just start way too big.
Yeah.
So this is key in my success, I think.
I love that. Great, Tracy. Who else? Anybody else?
Yeah, the start small is huge for me too, but re-engineer your habit loop to really like sit down and inventory the bad habits that I want to change or the good habits that I want to form.
Love
and
that, man.
write out the 3 statements for those and make those visible.
That's awesome.
For me.
You hit on something really big there, Steve. for a lot of us, just like making an inventory. What are all those habits that make up my life? And are they positive? Are they taking me close? Which ones are taking me closer? Because we do have some positive ones in there, right? Want to know what those are and which ones are taking me further away. And then having that, now you've got all the raw data you need for creating that and re-engineering that loop. That's awesome. Anybody else? Well, as you think about this, I need to honor your time and let you folks get on with your day. I want you to think about one step. Identify just one step you'll take this week, just like Steve talked about, getting that inventory down and then writing out, re-engineering some of those loops. That's a phenomenal step. Starting small. So when you think about starting small, what would that look like? What would that first habit be? What would that micro habit be? It's something you could do in 60 seconds or less, that small. Okay. And have that, know what that is. If you made that one change as a result of today's webinar, that would be transformational for you. And that's really what we're interested in. I want to thank you. And just one final thing I want to mention is, that's what coaching is really all about. We talked about enlisting a peak performance partner. Coaching is all about bringing someone into your life who can be a change partner with you, who creates this environment that is unlike any other environment, where you have this person who is 100% committed to helping you achieve your goals, to be a thinking partner, to be a change partner, to be a source of motivation and encouragement, to help you get clear on those steps you need to take, and to make sure you've got a regular check-in to make sure those steps are taking place. And when you can step into an environment like that, it literally is life-changing. That's why we're passionate about this whole process of coaching. And if you're interested, if today's webinar has sparked something inside of you, you'd like to kind of think more into this whole issue of habits and really get more clear on some of the changes that you'd like to see take place and why that's so important to you and kind of what's really standing in your way, of how that could change, we would encourage you, just go to my website at billcoxcoaching.com. You'll see the hashtag free coaching. You can schedule a complimentary 1 hour, 45 to a minute hour session with me and really experience coaching for yourself with no additional investment other than your time, and really get on the process of transformation. We're all on this call today. Why? Because we want to change, because we want to grow, because we're created to grow, and we want to become better people and closer to that vision we have for our lives. And we would love to serve you along that journey. I want to thank you for being on today's webinar. I need to let all of you folks go. Before I let you go, any questions for me regarding today's content? Anything that I could answer for you? All right, great. Thank you, everybody. Paul, do you have any final instructions for everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, I just want to thank you for that content. That was phenomenal. I was writing down, don't trade short-term happiness for long-term joy. And what a powerful statement that is, that we can become those people that we've been desiring to become. And our habits can help carry us there. And it doesn't have to be the whole thing all at once. It can be those little incremental steps that each one of us can begin to take today. So thank you for that. And I want to thank everybody else for joining us. We're in this rhythm right now of doing a webinar per month, and we're having a blast doing it. And a lot of the things that we're talking about come right out of the feedback that we get from the last webinar. And so I'd encourage you to stay connected to our email list, where we'll talk about the upcoming webinar. And I'll tease it for you right now. May 19th at noon, we're going to be doing a webinar called Detox Your Thoughts. It's kind of like step 2, I think, to this webinar, right, Bill? So yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about, what are those mindsets that are unhealthy and how can we begin to reset them, replace them, and ultimately allow them to drive us in a good direction. So thanks for joining us. We're excited that you're on the call and hope to see you on May 19th at noon. We'll talk about Detox Your Thoughts.
Thank you, everybody. Great to have you today.
Thank
Have a great
you.
week.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Phil.
Thank you,
You
gentlemen. Have
too.
a good day.
Hey, thanks again for watching today's video. And before you go to the bottom of the screen, like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and make sure you go to billcoxcoaching.com. Sign up for our regular newsletter to help you move from success to significance and lead your life in such a way that you live a legacy. Have a great day.